Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. We're back on track, and that's a fact at Backlick Cinema, the podcast. I'm your host, Zoe. That's Z-O or Z-O if you're cinema fans from overseas. And we're taking a look back at the movies of yesteryear. It's the 84th episode. Thank you for downloading or streaming. We really appreciate it. The reason we started this show was to strengthen the bond between my son, Zach, and me. We watched movies that I loved when I was growing up in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, and I'm going to tell you what Zach thought about those classic movies, like the one we just recently watched. Up next is the opening credits, but before we get there, I'd like you to check out a podcast I've been listening to, the Made for TV Movie Club podcast, or as they like to say, give them a goo at #MFTVMC podcast.
Hello, everyone. I'm Beth.
And I'm Kirsten, and we are the hosts of the Made for TV Movie Club podcast. Beth, we've been friends for a long time.
We sure have, Kay, since before Rachel kissed Ross for the first time.
It's true, and since we share a love of all things TV, we decided to team up to review our favorite TV movies from the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
You don't need to watch the movie. We did that for you.
You can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, including Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Deezer, and iHeartRadio.
And find us on our socials.
Join us in our Facebook group, Made for TV Movie Club Podcast. Follow us on Insta at made_for_TV_movie_club. Tweet us at TV Movie Club Pod 1.
Or give us a Goog at #MFTVMC podcast, and you'll find us.
We'll see you soon in the clubhouse.
And we're back. So that the movie that we had just watched, this is the opening credits. And the movie that we just watched was Alien Nation. It's a movie that I love from back in the day. There's so many things I love about it. I loved the concept. I love the makeup, the costumes. Let me just tell you about this movie. In 1988, an alien spaceship arrives and is marooned on Earth in the Mojave Desert, carrying hundreds of thousands of refugees, passengers with no way of returning to their home world. These aliens are integrated into society in the vicinity of Los Angeles. One of these aliens, now known as newcomers, becomes the first to reach the rank of police detective and is partnered with Matthew Sykes. Together, they team up to investigate a seedy newcomer underworld to find the people responsible for the murder of Sykes' former partner. But they find so much more. This movie was released May 23rd, 1988, produced by American Entertainment Partners 2, LP, and Western Pacific and 20th Century Fox. It grossed over $25 million in the US and Canada and over $32 million worldwide on a $16 million budget, and it had poor reviews. Now, that's kind of sad. I thought that it would have made a lot more money. I certainly love this movie. I didn't get a chance to see it in theaters, but when I got a chance to see it at home, I truly enjoyed it. I think I saw it on video or something like that. But anyways, wow. It made so little money. This almost qualifies as a bomb when you think about it. Like the grand total was $32 million, so it barely made twice its budget. And in Hollywood accounting, that really counts as an ultimate failure. But the strange thing about this failure is that it continues on, and we'll talk about how it continues on in the trivia. So this movie was starring James Caan as Matthew Sykes. We know him from The Godfather, Thief, and Misery, and so many other movies. And he had just passed away recently. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to review this film, or to talk about this film, is because James Caan is in it. And obviously, we got to talk about Misery, but that's further down the road. Up next is Mandy Patinkin. He plays a character named Samuel or George Francisco, but his real name is Stanya Salins. His name, because he's the alien. You see, he's the alien, so that's his name from before he was renamed by the humans. You've seen him in Homeland, a popular TV show, one of his most recent works. He was also in Dick Tracy, but most people remember him as Inigo Montoya. I don't know how to say his name, but anyway, he was in The Princess Bride, and his famous line is, "I am Inigo Montoya. You killed my father, and now you must die." You remember that, right, from The Princess Bride? Yeah, that's him in this movie. I found that fascinating. Following this is Terrence Stamp. He played William Harcourt. You remember him from Superman 2, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and Get Smart from 2008. Kevin Major Howard played Rudyard Kipling. He's been in Full Metal Jacket, Sudden Impact, Death Wish 2. When I say Rudyard Kipling, I don't mean the actual author Rudyard Kipling. He's an alien given that name. It's kind of a thing. We'll get into that later. Leslie Beavis played Cassandra. She's been in The Lonely Guy, Spaceballs, and the TV show Dallas. Up next, Peter Jackson, not the filmmaker. This is an actor. He played Fedorchuk. He's been in 48 Hours, They Live, and Mortal Kombat from 1985. Conrad Dunn played Quint. He's been in Stripes, Control Factor, and Chicago. Roger Aaron Brown played Bill Tuggle. You've seen him in RoboCop 2, and maybe you've seen him in Seeking a Friend for the End of the World or Action Jackson. Finally, we have Brian Thompson. He played Trent Porter. I needed to put him in here because he has such a distinctive face. Whenever you see Brian Thompson, you know what I'm talking about. It's like his face says it all. I mean, quite literally. He's been in Cobra, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, and Dragonheart. So if you remember Mortal Kombat specifically, and the man that played Khan, the Emperor Khan or whatever, the main bad guy in that movie, when you see that face, you're like, yo, yeah, Brian Thompson, yeah, that guy. So that rounds up the people that I wanted to include in this cast. So this movie was directed by Graham Baker. He's only had 11 director credits, 1 writer credits, 1 producer credit. And the writer and producer credit is for a film short that he did called Leaving Lily. And he directed that one as well. He also directed Beowulf from 1999 and Born to Ride, which was a project that starred John Stamos. He did not have a lot as far, going for him as far as as far as his filmography. Didn't contribute a lot to the art. This movie was written by Rock S. O'Banner, and I believe I probably talked about him before. You may have seen his name. I'm not sure if his name is Rock or Rockney. It could be Rockney. It's a weird spelling. It's a weird first name, Rockney S. O'Bannon. But anyways, he's mainly a TV writer. I like him because he created Farscape, which is one of my favorite TV shows. He also created Cult, and he's also a writer for The Evil TV series, if you're a fan of that show. The music is by Kurt Sobel. He has 22 credits to his name. He's also done Ray, The Insider, and Ghostbusters Afterlife. The only thing I would say about the music in this movie is not particularly inspiring. It's really standard. This is like a detective movie, so this is standard detective movie music. Nothing truly stands out, except for a couple of the pop songs that they included in the movie, which they weren't even really used as needle drops, just background music. So it's really not particularly great. So that's it for the opening credits. And if you're enjoying the show, remember that you can get t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, face masks, and jerseys, and more at our website, backflickcinema.com. All right, we're back. And now I'm going to talk about our favorite parts of Alien Nation. So, as I said earlier, this is about a species of aliens. Somehow they got to Earth, and marooned on Earth. They don't have a way of getting home. They arrived in a giant spaceship. There are about 300,000 of them, or at least hundreds of thousands. And at first, they're quarantined for a few years, and then they're integrated into society by then President Ronald Reagan. So around 1988 or around that time, Ronald Reagan decreed that, the aliens should be released from quarantine. So they're in Los Angeles. They're integrated into society. They get jobs. There are neighborhoods that are set aside for them, and basically just kind of carry on with their lives. And one of the things that I really liked about this movie was the alien design. So they're like subtly human. They're slightly different from human. They're about the same size, but they have larger heads, and they've got like painted spots all over their head. And the spots actually go through all over their bodies, but it's mainly noticeable in their head. And and the makeup design, it feels flawless. It was like you can't really separate the person from the makeup. And also they have their bodies, especially the male bodies for the aliens. They're bulkier. They kind of look like Frankenstein when they're wearing clothes. They have like larger shoulders and a more protruding chest. Apparently no genitalia, or I guess the genitalia or the genitals are inside of their bodies, and but similar to human males. And then it's just a striking design that I found immediately attractive. And then the whole weird mythology of them just being allowed to integrate in society. I actually can't imagine that happening. I think the humans would find a way to exterminate the aliens while they were still in quarantine. It's actually a kind of easy thing to do. But that's what attracted me to this movie. The whole thing that you could just have aliens come on Earth, and then they could just be in society, and then they could be, you going to work and you working with your alien coworker or your alien boss or whatever. So the thing about these aliens is that they are called newcomers. They never actually revealed the name of the aliens or the alien species in the movie. But if you, they do have some extra material out there. So if you look at the extra material, you find out that I think they're called tectonese, and but they're called newcomers. So the newcomers are genetically engineered and modified to work in almost any environment. So they're able to withstand certain things that most species can't handle. And they don't go into too much of like how they were genetically modified, who did it, but only that they were slaves. So somehow apparently there was a navigational malfunction with these slaves. They were supposed to be transported to I guess another planet, and somehow there was a navigational error and they ended up on Earth. So now these slaves are freed essentially and allowed to live out their lives in a manner that they've never been able to before. So I mentioned their bodies. Their bodies really do look misshapen, which is one of the things that I think was kind of a genius in how they designed these characters. So the story centers around Sam Francisco. So Sam, S-A-M. So here's the joke. Here's the joke right here. So well, first, before I go into the actual the joke and all that, let me start at the beginning. The beginning of the movie had a really nice gun battle. So you have one of the main characters, Matthew Sykes, and he's with his partner Bill Tuggle. Bill Tuggle's played by Roger Aaron Brown. So they're on a patrol, and then they actually see an actual robbery in progress, and they're in one of the newcomer neighborhoods. They call it Slag Town because slag is a derogatory term for the newcomers. And because James Caan's Matthew Sykes, because he's a bigot, he uses that term an awful lot. He used that term to introduce himself. He he does not particularly like the newcomers, and there are a lot of people that are annoyed by this alien presence. So it's easy for him to be prejudiced against them because they're not even human in the first place. So they they see what looks like two newcomers going into this newcomer, I guess it's a convenience store, and it looks like the convenience store is about to be robbed. So they pull over and they try to convene a way to contrive a way to stop this robbery. And these aliens have these, I don't know, gigantic shotguns. It's crazy. So the shootout obviously ensues. But one of the things that happens is that the partner, Bill Tuggle, he's hiding behind his car, and the aliens, he's across the street from the robbery, and one of the aliens is shooting at him with one of these giant shotguns, and the round is going clean through the car. It's like the car offers no protection. So the first place he's at is like the round goes through the engine block and near the front wheel well, and that's where like the Officer Tuggle is. So he starts to move over, and as he's moving over, inching over away from the shot, still against the car, moving his way to the rear of the car, another bullet hole appears at the side on the door, and then another bullet hole appears, and it's like all the way till he gets to the end of the car, and then like there's no more cover. He is like, if he continues to go, he's outside and he's totally exposed in the street, but at the same time, the bullets can go through the car. So he's at the end of the car, and then all of a sudden his chest explodes, and the bullet goes through him. So one of the things about this movie is that it's ostensibly about race relations, it's about prejudice and racism. So and this is like an allegory for all the types of racism in the country right now. So, and that is the all of the name calling and the term slag and all this sort of thing. But the ironic thing is that it's like, even though this room is supposed to be about racism, Bill Tuggle, who just got his chest blown open, he's a black cop. He's a black officer, and James Caan's Matthew Sykes' partner. So the first human character that gets killed is the black man. So I just thought it's like, if you're gonna make a statement about crazy, how about we stay away from the racist tropes in movies? How about we at least do that? They didn't do that, but that didn't totally ruin my enjoyment of the movie. But I just thought that was interesting. So anyway, there's a lot going on with the gunfight after Sykes' partner Bill Tuggle gets killed. The newcomers actually starts running away, and Sykes paces after them, and then he's able to find or corner one of them in some kind of tunnel. But the tunnel is dark; he can't really see. He's at the entrance of the tunnel, and then all of a sudden the alien is we're taken to where the alien is at. So the alien, he takes out some kind of tube out of his jacket. It's like a tiny tube of liquid, and he drinks the entire tiny tube of liquid, and then it energizes him. It makes him more aggressive. So he starts running down the tunnel, running towards Sykes at full speed. So as soon as Sykes can see this alien running towards him, he starts, firing his shots. He has a regular pistol. He fires like 4 or 5 shots into him. The alien barely stops. And then and he basically empties his clip into the alien, and the alien is finally downed. So what we learn is that, well, we already know that the aliens are denser and stronger than regular people, and they're more resilient. But when they take this drug, they become aggressive, and they tend to ignore pain. So it's kind of like PCP or something like that. But Sykes is not aware of the drug. He only knows that the alien becomes super aggressive and tries to take him down. So that was a great opening scene. So after all of this, that's when he goes to, like, the next day, he goes into the office, and he's really traumatized by the death of his partner. And in most situations, I imagine that the partner would take the day off, but instead he goes. I think the reason he returns to work is that he's going to try to finagle a way to find out the why and how his partner got killed, because he doesn't think that it was a simple bank robbery. He thinks it was something bigger than a bank robbery. And so he wants to get to the bottom of it. That's when we're introduced to, I mentioned earlier, Officer Francisco. He's a uniformed officer, and he's going to be the first newcomer to be promoted to detective third grade. So he's going to be a plainclothes police officer, and the captain is looking for volunteers. Now, obviously, nobody wants to volunteer, and there are people talking about they're going to call their union because they don't want this newcomer to be in their ranks. But Matthew Sykes sees this as an opportunity, so he goes and he volunteers to be the partner that for this newcomer. So what's interesting is that, like I said before, the newcomers have funny kind names. So what happens is when the newcomers get there, they have their names are hard to pronounce by people. So the government gives them new, easy to pronounce English names or English or American style names. And they start off with well, I guess they start off with regular names, but some people in the government offices, they get creative, so they start giving them names like Albert Einstein, or as I mentioned before, Rudyard Kipling, or something like that, some crazy names. So the detective, when George meets him first, he's introduced like, "Hi, I went to meet Officer Francisco." Like, "Francisco, nice to meet you," or whatever. And then later on, it was like, "So what's your first name?" It's like, "My first name is Samuel." And then at first, Sykes let it go. And then he's like, "Wait, hold on. Your name is Sam Francisco. There's no way I'm going to call you Sam Francisco." And if you see the way James Caan, the way he acts, is like he does that classic frustration that you're used to seeing from him. And what's neat about James Caan is that he plays this everyman, and he does it very well. And so you really get to see what, like, the most basic, the most normal person, how a most normal person would react to having to work with an alien, or something like the alien government name being Sam Francisco. So he's upset about this. Like, "There's no way I'm going to call you San Francisco. There's no way I'm going to introduce you to friends as San Francisco. It's like, from now on, I'm going to call you George. Your name is George." And so from then on, he's referred to as George Francisco. So I really like that. I really like the acting that James Caan puts into this movie. So the reason that he's they're partnering up, or the reason he volunteered, because he doesn't like the newcomers. He's prejudiced against them, and he's a bigot against the newcomers. So, and he even told George Francisco to his face that, "I don't even like you. I'm just using you to get what I want." So there was the murder of his partner, and there was another murder of another newcomer, and he thinks that the two cases may be related because of the robbery. He doesn't think that the men came to rob the convenience store, that apparently they was after something else. So he's going to use George to investigate this other murder, because he's not allowed to investigate the murder of his partner. And because he thinks the two murders are related, he's basically going to finagle himself into investigating the murder of his partner. There's another funny thing about Sykes. So Sykes, he's kind of asking, like, you don't mind if we find your names to be, kind of funny or strange. And that's when George says, "Well, your names are funny too. For example, your name, Sykes, sounds a lot like what in our language sounds like cranium and excrement." and Matthew Sykes looks at him with cranium and excrement. And then and then George spells it out for him, shithead, because so Sykes' name in the alien language sounds like shithead. That was a funny part. I really liked that part. So as we continue, the aliens are also extremely, not that they're extremely smart, but they learn really quickly. So it only took George 3 months to learn English, and you have like 5-year-olds in high school because the aliens learn so rapidly. There's another scene that I truly liked is when they're on the case. They're working at night. This is a dark movie. A lot of things happen at night. So they going to stop at a food stand to get something to eat, like they do in standard police films. They're given their takeout containers, and so Sykes opens his, and he's immediately disgusted. It's like, oh my god, what is this? And they have to trade containers. Like, what is that? What is that? What is that? And George says it's raw beaver. It's like, what? Why you got to do that? Why would it hurt you to cook it a little bit? And George has to explain that they can't metabolize meat they can't metabolize anything that's cooked. They can only metabolize the stuff that's raw. And so George is eating raw beaver meat, and then George starts to tease him. It's like, well, how can you say you don't like it? Like I always tell my son, how do you know you don't like a thing unless you taste it? And Sykes is so disgusted. We don't even know what Sykes had ordered, but he is so disgusted that he just throws his food in the trash, right? So he can't, after being exposed to raw beaver meat, he can't take it. So he just throws his food in the trash. He completely lost his appetite. So during their investigation, there's another scene that I really like. I call this the Porter scene. This is the scene where we find Brian Thompson. So in this, they're given information that leads them to somebody that would know something about the case. And this guy is at a newcomer bar or a slag bar. I'm using the derogatory term that they use in the movie because when Sykes goes up into the bar, he said, "Which one of you slags is Trent Porter? Where's Porter here?" It's like, and so he opens up with an insult, right? Into a bar that's full of newcomers, full of aliens, and they all kind of look at him and ignore him because they're all because this isn't like a high what should I say? This is not an upscale bar. This is a very down and dirty type of bar. So nobody really answers, but somebody says, "Who wants to know?" So they go down to the end of the bar to find it. And Sykes immediately starts harassing the person that said, "Who wants to know?" Like, what is your name? Is your name Trent Porter? Is your name Porter? And then this other guy stands up, and Francisco stops him. It's like, "No, this is the guy. This is the guy you want to talk to." So I like that. It was a nice, clever ploy. One dude would claim to be somebody that's being searched for, while the other dude was the guy that was actually Trent Porter was going to sneak out. But Francisco is there. He's confident. And they start to question him, but it's not effective. Like, Francisco is trying to give Sykes advice because this is his people. He knows how to talk to them and all this sort of thing. But because Sykes is prejudiced and a bigot, he doesn't want to listen to Francisco. He doesn't want to give him any credence to his abilities as a police officer or even as a member of the newcomer community. He wants to do it all on his own. He don't want any help from him until he gets into an altercation with the guy. He's trying to ask him questions. At first he says, what's your name? And the guy says something in his language, and he has to look to Francisco. Francisco said, well, he said, "Screw you." And then he says, "Look, maybe you're deaf, but I'm going to have to ask you one more time. Are you Porter?" And then the alien says something else. Sykes looks at Francisco for translation. And first Francisco says, "You don't want to know." And then Sykes like, go on, tell me, what did he say? And the translation is, your mother mates out of season. Like, apparently this is the hardest insult that an alien will give you. Your mother mates out of season. So I thought that was really funny. So he's trying to intimidate the alien. Remember, the aliens are stronger and more resilient than humans, and their bodies are denser. So he's trying to do all these intimidation tactics. You know, he's trying to hit him, and he kicks him where in the groined area where you would think his genitalia is supposed to be, and then the alien just laughs at him, and he's like, they didn't teach you anything about the newcomers in cop school. But then he grabs Sykes and he's about to swing on him, but then Francisco stops him and he calms him down. He says that we're going to try to find the murder of your father. And then that calms Porter down. He admits that he's Porter, and he tells them what he knows about the case. That was the scene that that was one of the scenes that I really like. But it's just that, you know, Francisco is trying to help out, even though he knows that his partner is prejudiced against him, even though he knows his partner hates his people. He's still trying to be amicable. He's still trying to help him out. He's maintaining an even keel when it comes to dealing with his racist partner. And he does that. He basically does that throughout the movie. He's having patience because he knows that he needs to have patience, and he needs Matthew Sykes basically just to get used to him or get used to his presence. And as they get used to each other's presence, then Matthew will learn to work with him and at least be amicable. So, like, one of the things that happened is that he tries. So remember the kick to the groin earlier. So after they let Trent Porter go, Francisco asks Sykes, you know, do you want me to give you some advice? And Sykes says, okay. And then he says, like, our weak spots are different than yours. So if you hit somebody in a nerve center that's just under the arms, then that will have the effect that you were looking for. And of course, Sykes says, you know, I know that. What's it like? Why would you say that? You obviously don't know. Everybody knows that you don't know. Why would you say that? So, but Sykes is an asshole just for the sake of being an asshole. What they learn eventually is that this is all drug related. So you have this big shot businessman, William Harcourt, played by Terrence Stamp. He is manufacturing a drug that was used to control the slaves on the ship that had basically encouraged the workers to work harder. So it's like, if you were a hard worker, you would get the drug, and if you worked, the harder you worked, the more of the drug you would get. And all of the slaves, all of the aliens were addicted to it. Now, apparently, they were able to get over their addiction because the drugs were destroyed, or they ran out of drugs. The drugs were gone. So all of the aliens were able to get off of the drugs, and whatever children they had, they were never exposed to the drug. But William Harcourt has figured out how to manufacture the drugs again, and he's got a bunch of business partners to manufacture to make the drug and try to distribute the drugs. And he wants to sell the drugs so that, you know, basically he can be a drug dealer and make even more money on top of all the money that he has already. And he's a respected member of the community. Nobody knows what he's doing. And another thing that's a twist to the drug is, because the way drugs work, it's like this drug is not going to be evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. So it's not technically illegal. It's just something that's harmful to the aliens, but it's not technically illegal. So it is, even though they're keeping it on the down low because they're trying to avoid attention, it's still something that they're not really worried about from a legal standpoint. But so I thought that was an interesting element of the movie. So one of the things that happens was an interesting scene, because Harcourt is a drug dealer. He needs distributors, so he's looking for businessmen to distribute his drug. And so one of the guys, they bring this one guy to a beach or harbor or something like that. Anywhere where there's like an ocean. So they're on the beach. They're talking to this. He has like human employees, right? So apparently the human employees have been trying to like beat him into cooperating and distributing the drug, but the guy's not cooperating. And so William Harcourt shows up. And what's interesting is that it only takes a minute to realize, oh yeah, that's Terrence Stamp. So Harcourt shows up and he's trying to convince the dude to distribute the drugs, and the dude don't want to do it because he knows how harmful this drug is. So the human guys, they pick up this guy and they start carrying him into the ocean. And the guy is like just screaming, just absolutely screaming. And we're going to get into why the aliens are the derogatory term for the alien is slag. Because when you put the alien in salt water, which is what the human guys did, they start the salt water is like acid to them. So it starts eating at their skin. And then when water is finished doing its work, really all you have left is burnt up bones. It's like the flesh is eaten away, and the only thing left behind is blackened bones. And so all of the aliens are basically terrified of salt water. Yeah, Earth is not a great place to land if you're trying to live a healthy life. But so that's what happens when they get in contact with salt water. That is why they're referred to as slags. And that's why I said earlier, if any time they wanted to get rid of aliens while the aliens were still in quarantine, they could have just sprayed them with salt water and that would have gotten rid of the alien problem. But I'm glad in this version of humanity, the humans aren't like that. And I'm also glad that the aliens aren't there to conquer the world. They're just there to live. That's one of the things that's different about this movie and other alien movies or alien visitation movies, is that a lot of times the aliens are there to try to conquer, or they're there because they are higher, they have higher technology, and I guess they want to share their technology with humans. That's also an aspect of alien visitation. But in this version, they don't really have higher technology except for the alien spaceship, which they never explain what's happened to in the movie. So and the aliens don't know how to operate the ship because they're slaves. So there's no advantage of higher technology. They're not there to try to conquer the world. They're just there to try to live. There's a car chase scene that I really like. And what's interesting about the car chase scene is like it goes like all over the city. It's really nice. It's really well shot, really well done. It's really good. Car chasing scenes. Interesting twist in that the bad guys get into a police car and the good guys get into their unmarked police car and they start chasing them around. So it looks like the reverse of what you usually see. But the interesting thing about this is that it ends in a game of chicken where the two cars are on the opposite end of a driveway and they start racing towards each other. And Sykes is trying to convince Francisco. He's like, no, don't worry, I never lose in a game of chicken, which is the weirdest thing that you could say. But apparently the aliens don't care about the game of chicken. And what ends up is that they crash into each other. George is completely knocked out. And the other two aliens, they basically, the Harcourt makes it out okay, but the other alien he also seems to be knocked out. And so since George is knocked out, it's just Sykes, even though he's kind of messed up. He gets out and he starts to pursue Harcourt. And then for some reason, the police car explodes. That doesn't make any sense. At any rate, I know why it exploded. They wanted to get rid of the other alien, the assistant, because there was a Harcourt and his right-hand man. So the car explodes, so the right-hand man is there. But that all seemed very unnecessary. So anyways, Sykes pursues Harcourt. They're near the harbor, but they're not like where the boats are. So they're in like, I guess, a parking structure. And Sykes is telling Harcourt, you're going to have to give up or I'm going to shoot you or whatever. But Harcourt is like, no, this isn't the end. This is just the beginning. Or he says something to that effect. And he has this giant vial of this alien drug. The drug is called Jakarta. So he breaks open this giant vial. The vial is about the size, I don't know, of a short baseball bat. It's a pretty big vial of drugs. Normally when you see the aliens take this drug in a movie, it's just the first time you see it, the drug has this tiny vial and he drinks the whole vial and he becomes super aggressive. Another time that when you see one of the aliens take the drug, it's just basically he dips something like a toothpick. There we go. Something the size of a toothpick. He sticks that in a vial, lays that on his tongue, and that's how he gets his high. So apparently they only need a very tiny amount to get the high that they need. They don't need to drink the entire vial. They're drinking the entire tiny vial makes them super aggressive. But so all they need to get the high that they need is to dip a toothpick into the drug and then put it on their tongue and they get what they need out of it. But Harcourt has this giant vial. It's a giant vial of Jakarta drug. And he breaks the vial with his hand and he just slurps it out. It's so much of the drug that it goes in his mouth. It goes all over his face. It's dripping down his suit. It's a lot of drugs. So the drug goes all over in his body and his face. And then he falls to the ground. He starts to convulse and he appears to be dead. So Sykes says, "Oh, that was easy. Case closed. The alien is dead." Oh, also another element of this is that the drug is not something that humans know about. So they know about the aliens, they know about the spaceship. They don't know about the drug. And when George starts to sense that this drug is in play, he does everything that he can to hide that from all of the humans, including his partner. So finally, at some point in the movie, Sykes, he corners George and he says, "What is this? What are you talking about? What's going on here?" And so George has to tell him about the drug. He says, "We can't let people know about this drug. It's something that they use to control us. And so we can't let humans know about how this drug is used to control us." And so Sykes says, he tentatively agrees to try to keep it on the down low. Sykes gets back to George. They're at George's wake and there's another police car and he was like, "Yeah, it's all good. We're all good here. We're fine. Let's go get somebody to pick up the dead alien body and call it a night." And George is like, so you shot him?" And it was like, no, he OD'd on the drug. By this time, they're already driving away in the police car. I was like, "Oh no, we got to go back. This is messed up." He's not, because he hasn't OD'd. They had sent somebody to pick up the body. The body was in the corner van driving away from the scene as well. And inside the corner van, this is kind of where it kind of takes a slight turn, becomes something of a horror movie. The body bag is ripped open and out peeks the mutated Harcourt. Now he's super large, super monstrous, and basically there's nothing remaining of the intellect of Harcourt. Now it's just the alien monster. And he quickly rips through the two human drivers of the corner van and then runs out and escapes. And through George, we found out that so Harcourt was never dead. When he OD'd on this drug, it basically put his body into a kind of coma or stasis for a short period of time and his body got a chance to metamorphize, and he basically hulked out. So you have the Incredible Hulk alien going around basically causing all kinds of trouble. So now George really wants to tap down on this drug thing, right? They can't let people know about the drug or Harcourt. They had to stop him. It's like, maybe we should get some backups. Like, no, we can't get backup. What if people found out about this? What would it mean for us? Well, imagine if the human race found out that you can manufacture a drug that can turn the newcomers and the monsters. This is not going to play well. So one of the police, before he was killed, he managed to go and call for helicopter support while Sykes goes after the mutated Harcourt. So they actually end up now they're running around the boats that are at the harbor. Sykes is jumping on boats, and then the hardcore creature is following. Remember, there's little intellect left now. While this is happening, George is in a helicopter and he's flying out to Marina. One of the reasons that they're flying is because George is definitely afraid of salt water, as he should be. I think he's more afraid than the average alien, though. So they're flying over the water to, I guess, offer Sykes some assistance from the air. What I like is, another thing I liked is how Sykes was thinking. Like his mindset of the first thing to do was to immediately get to the water. And the second thing that he thought of was that he went to a larger boat and then went to like a small, like it almost looked like a lifeboat, like a rowboat. So he jumps from the regular boat to a rowboat, and that alien monster follows him to the rowboat. And then Sykes is a little bit concealed, so the monster doesn't see him at first. And then he calls attention to himself. The monster turns around and he dives on the monster and pushes both of them overboard into the salt water, where even though the monster is being killed by the salt water, like the monster is being dissolved by the salt water, he's still fighting Sykes. So it takes a little bit before enough of the monster is dissolved before Sykes is okay. Meanwhile, George is overhead. He sees them. The helicopter goes down, and they're able to rescue Sykes. For whatever reason, Sykes is unable to swim. And after the fight, either it could be that he was too, I don't know, tired, and he couldn't swim after the fight, or he was too injured because maybe the alien had injured him. I don't know. I wish they had conveyed that he had been injured, but for whatever reason, Sykes is unable to swim, so he's going under. So the helicopter lowers down, and because it's only Francisco there, the alien who, if he touches water and he's already definitely afraid of salt water, then he knows that the water will consume him. But he sees Sykes, so he reaches down into the water to grab Sykes, and all the while he's screaming bloody murder because his hand is being dissolved. But he's able to pull Sykes out of the water, rescuing him, and the day is saved. Well, at least Sykes is. So basically, even though Sykes is prejudiced and is a bigot towards the aliens, Francisco basically risks his life because he could have been pulled into the water. He risks his life and injures himself in order to save his partner. So, I thought that was pretty. I like that. I really liked all of that. So, on the surface, I mean, it's basically it's a basic detective movie. It's a very basic detective movie, but I liked the alien elements that they had put into it, and all of those things that I really enjoyed. So that's Alien Nation. I really encourage, if you haven't seen it already, I truly encourage you to see it. So a couple other interesting things about this movie is that there's a sign you see for Rambo 6. It's funny how movies can kind of predict other movies. So I saw this one time before in I Am Legend, where they kind of predicted a Batman Superman movie, and then years later you see a Batman versus Superman movie. And in this case, there's a sign for Rambo 6, and we're almost at 6 Rambo movies. We're at 5 right now, so we're almost at Rambo 6. Another thing was a gag that they had at when they was looking through one of the suspects' belongings. They find a condom amongst the belongings, and George is like, "What is this?" And Sykes is like, "Well, it's a rubber. It's a rubber." And he explained, what the rubber is used for. Then he was like, he feels like he has to open the rubber and show him because the rubber is in the package. So he opens up the condom package, and then he rolls the condom down his fingers. He's like, "Yeah, see?" And George is looking, and he takes it off, and George takes it and he kind of looks at it, and he's like, "And still it fits?" Sykes is like, "Yeah, it stretches, it's rubber." And George is still like, "And still it fits?" Right? So obviously it's George making fun of the human penis size. And the last thing I wanted to mention about this, that I hadn't thought about this in a long time, but the title of the movie, it had a lot of whack titles when it was in production, but they settled on Alien Nation. And it's two words, Alien Nation. But if you look at it's a double entendre because it's also alienation, as you know, as to be put apart or to be set aside or not able to participate, alienation. So I like the double entendre that they put on the title of the film. So that's it for talking about my favorite parts. And up next is the trivia provided by IMDb. All right, now we are here for the trivia provided by IMDb. So let's get started. Lots of juicy stuff here. When James Caan was asked about this film during an interview with the AV Club in 2013, he replied, quote, "Why the fuck? Why would you bring up that?" End quote. The interviewer, Will Harris, said, quote, "A lot of people actually like the film. I do for one." End quote. Caan continued, quote, "Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't have too many. I mean, I love Mandy Patinkin. Mandy was a riot. But I don't know. It was a lot of silly stuff, creatively. And we had this English director who I wasn't really that fond of. I mean, nice guy, but it was just one of those things where, you know, you don't quite, you get through it. It certainly wasn't I wouldn't write it down as one of my favorite movies, but it was pretty popular," end quote. So, and the director that he refers to is Graham Baker, obviously. So up next, Sam Francisco, played by Mandy Patinkin, was originally going to be named George Jetson, but Hanna-Barbera wouldn't give the rights to that name. The decision to call the character George in the movie was kept as an in-joke to the George Jetson character name. The October 1987 draft of the screenplay credits a rewrite to James Cameron, but Cameron is not credited in the final film. The language of the newcomers is called Tectonese. The written version, seen in graffiti and signage, does not reflect the spoken language, but uses Tectonese characters to represent English letters, saying such things as no smoking and authorized personnel only. What's interesting is that Tectonese is also, I think I mentioned earlier, the name of the species that they never mentioned in the film, nor did they mention the name of the writing. Kurt Sobel replaced Jerry Goldsmith as the film's composer. Goldsmith's score was rejected early in the post-production for being too weird and replaced with music by Sobel. Goldsmith's rejected score was released in spring 2005 as a Verasi Sarabande CD Club release, limited to 3,000 copies. And as I mentioned earlier, Kurt Sobel's score was extremely generic. The movie spawned a short-lived television series, Alien Nation, from 1989, which ran for about a year. The picture and its subsequent series also spun off 5 television movies during the 1990s. Alien Nation Dark Horizon from 1994, Alien Nation Body and Soul 1995, Alien Nation Millennium 1996, Alien Nation The Enemy Within 1996, and Alien Nation The Udar Legacy from 1997. Also created was a series of comic books and a series of science fiction novels. I truly love that show. I saw the show before I saw the movie, and I love that show. I watched most of the episodes. I missed most of the TV movies, but I love that TV show. I suppose if I truly was desperate, there's a boxed DVD set that costs around $150. I don't like it that much, but it was sorely tempting. The nickname that the cast and crew gave to the alien humanoid characters in the film was Potato Heads, due to their resemblance to potatoes. That's interesting. It's funny that they never actually used that in the film. That would have been hilarious. Originally touted for a July 1988 release for the film under its original title, Outer Heat, the title was changed to avoid confusion with that summer's Red Heat from 1988. Its delay to October due to the post-production overhaul paved the way for Die Hard to be 20th Century Fox's major action release for the summer, grossing more than triple this movie's box office tally, and earning more critical and commercial acclaim along the way. Furthermore, this movie's trailer debuted in front of the prints for Die Hard. A preliminary design sketch for the aliens. The males were going to have spines on the top of their heads, kind of like a rooster's comb, and when they got angry, these spines would raise up. That would have required a mechanical headpiece, and Graham Baker thought it was a little too extreme, so we went with the smooth heads instead. Coming close to the final design for the headpiece makeup, Woodruff explained how the masks had, quote, heavier brows and heavier skin texture that looked more leathery, and there were more pronounced lumps in the back of their heads. After we went into production on these masks, Graham Baker decided that he wanted the aliens to look even more subtle. So we streamlined the designs and we started doing the principal characters. Promotional lobby cards to be handed out to moviegoers were initially produced for the film, showing that originally it was going to be titled Space Cop LA 1991. It is unknown if they were actually distributed to theaters. The remaining samples are still commercially available to buy and are rather expensive. And you see why I said earlier that it really had some dumb titles. The first title, Red Heat or Outer Heat? Outer Heat. And this one is Space Cop LA 1991. Those are some dumb titles. I don't know what they were thinking. In the original script, the opening scene at the bar with the television newscast, the bar was supposed to be a cop bar in the Hollow Point. News announcements had placed the date of the flying saucer crash landing in the Mojave Desert as the morning of October the 19th of 1988, being due to a malfunction in the autopilot, while the occasion of the newscast itself was about the marking of the 3rd anniversary of the extraterrestrials' arrival, making the opening scene on the evening of October the 19th, 1991. Although several makeup effects companies were considered, 20th Century Fox chose Stan Winston Studios. Winston was not directly involved in the pre-production, but left the task to his top artists, Alec Gillis, Shane Mahan, John Rosengrant, Tom Woodruff, and Shannon Shea. Producer Gail Ann Hurd commented on creating the foundation for the makeup setting, saying, quote, the primary problem was how to sell an alien race that was humanoid without making it look like people in rubber suits, and how to make it affordable. We knew that there was going to be a lot of makeup application time and removal time that was a given. Artist Gillis recalled his involvement in the project, saying, quote, we were involved in everything from designing and sculpting the aliens to supervising a crew of about 30 people. We sculpted the main characters, supervised the molding and production of the appliances, and oversaw the sculpting and secondary and background characters. During the design phase, the producers supported the subtlety of the makeup and trying to make the aliens look as human as possible. After the generic alien concept was finalized, each of the effects coordinators worked with a specific actor. Mahan chose to work with Mandy Patinkin as well as Francisco's son. Rosengrant worked with Leslie Beavis, who played Cassandra. Woodruff worked on Terrence Stamp, who played the part of Harcourt. In trying to emphasize the uniqueness of the characters, Mahan commented, we wanted the audience to be able to recognize the actors immediately. They were all so good, and it would have been a shame to cover them up completely. Other effects coordinators like Gillis remarked, the actors who played Trent Porter, for example, Brian Thompson, was a really rugged guy, so he came off looking like a really tough character. On the other hand, Kevin Major Howard, who played Harcourt's murderous henchman, had very delicate, boyish kind of features, so we used that quality to create a creepy juxtaposition. While effects coordinators were struggling to finish the final design and full-scale production of the alien prosthetics, Hurd chose makeup artist Zoltan Ilik to supervise the overall application. Ilik had previously worked on the film Mask and the character Max Headroom. Ilik insisted that the alien coloration be much more closer to human skin tones rather than originally chosen yellow pigment. Elite recalled his disagreement with Winston, and as Stan felt, the aliens should be totally different color than the humans with a lot of yellows and blues and grays. To me, that scheme was too monstrous. In fact, we ended up using it on the Harcourt monster at the climax. Another creative aspect of the makeup was the graduation between the principal and background masks. The crew of Alien Nation sought to avoid the same mistakes made in Planet of the Apes 20 years earlier. As explained by Gillis, we had what we referred to as the A, B, C, D makeups. The A makeups were those custom designed for the principal actors, while the B makeups were mix and match, where we would combine pieces of other actors to create a new character. Our D masks were the ones furthest from the camera, were overhead slipped latex masks incapable of changing expression. And the C masks, however, were made of foam latex and could be glued down to get some expression from the characters in the middle ground. Lastly, after Harcourt's transformation, he is no longer played by Terrence Stamp, who refused to wear the more elaborate makeup. So yeah, it was, as I said, the creature basically hulked out. So, Terrence Stamp didn't want to put on all that additional makeup. So that's it for the trivia provided by IMDb. Up next is what the critics thought. All right, so this film is probably one of the lowest rated films of the movies that we have done on this show. Probably the lowest. I hadn't checked, but it's definitely pretty low. So the critics on Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 53%. So audience score was 44%. And on IMDb, it has a 3.6 out of 10. Yeah, pretty low. So let's get to what they were saying. Jay Carr from the Boston Globe wrote, instead of exploring the differences and strangeness of the aliens and giving them the kind of interesting peculiarity that Blade Runner did, Alien Nation can't domesticate and demystify the aliens quickly enough. I disagree with this. I think they left really a lot of unanswered questions, and really they really had a very interesting society that they touched on but never fully explained. And also, Blade Runner didn't have aliens. I know I'm being pedantic, but that is a strike against this guy. Up next, we have Walter Shaw, who wrote he wrote for Film Freak Central, and he wrote a sometimes brilliant metaphor for the experience of Asian American immigrants in the United States. And I thought this was interesting because whenever I'm thinking about issues of prejudice and racism, I'm thinking of it from an African American perspective. And I had not considered that somebody else was seeing this film was like, yeah, that's how Asian Americans were treated when they were in San Francisco. And I'm like, oh yeah, there's that. Up next is Roger Ebert from Chicago Sun-Times. He wrote, this plot contains the elements of a good idea, but it does so little with it. It is so cheerfully willing to recycle an absolutely standard story that the idea is finally just frustrating. So that's an interesting comment, because it's like he really wanted to go really into the alien aspect. And, after reading this comment and thinking about the first comment, maybe they could have gone more into the alienness of the aliens. But I think that they could have had maybe a stronger detective story. And this movie was initially longer. There were some parts they had cut out. But I'm thinking that but I really enjoyed the story, and I really enjoyed the aspect of the story. So I guess I'm coming from a different place. So finally, Kathleen Burke from United Press International wrote, there's a lot of requisite chase scenes, the ingenious murder weapons, the evil propagators of greed and hate, and somehow they don't bury you. In the end, it is the wit and heart of Alien Nation that wins you over. And I am with Kathy 1,000%. That there is a lot of wit in Alien Nation that I really enjoyed. That a lot of clever things that they did with the story and the plot. So I think that's one of the strongest reasons why I enjoyed it. So finally, Alienation is, as of this recording, available for purchase at your favorite streaming service. That's it for today. Please join us next week because we have a very special episode with director, producer, and actor Onyx Keisha. To learn more about her and her upcoming project, a movie to be released in 2023, Crescent Gang. Follow us on Twitter or TikTok at Backlook Cinema, or on Facebook or Instagram at Backlook Cinema Podcast for updates. Don't forget that you can contact us with any questions or comments or suggestions at fanmail@backlookcinema.com. One last time, if you like the show, then please help us grow. To do this, you can subscribe to the show, rate us, or write a review on Spotify, Podchaser.com, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. Believe me, it matters. Be safe, share a movie from yesteryear with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.